One. 1, 2. Thank you. Now, the last session, bar one, slide one, but the last session we've arrived at now, and it's going to be Michael Gibbons and Charlotte Bergen who will take us through this. Have we got all the 4 groups, their presenters on stage? Yeah? Okay, good. So we have an hour for this session, and then afterwards we'll do the closing. So Charlotte and Michael.
Thanks, Peter. Ooh, that sounds very loud. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you've got lots of coffee and cake to power you through this next session. It's been such an interesting day, lots of rich discussion and difficult questions and innovative ideas, and now comes that critical next step of how do we take this forward, which we're going to try and do in the next hour, so no pressure. I was very humbled to be asked to do this with the incredible Michael, given he's such a leader in our sector. And last night when we were talking about this session, he shared many inspirational insights with me, and one of which I thought I would pass on to you to help keep the energy up in the room. So we were talking about the many challenges to taking this forward that we have seen for many years, and how overwhelming that can seem, the kind of structural and systemic challenges. But Michael pointed out that we have over 200 change agents in this room, across sectors, across organisations, across different multiple roles. And so really what an incredible transformative power we have just in this room. So let's try and remember that in this last session of the day. What this session is really about, it's really about synthesising the findings from the discussions you've had during the day and then sketching out an action plan of how we might take that forward. And we know there is still a lot to discuss, so this is by no means kind of a final plan. It's really sketching out concrete actions we can take to move all of this work forward. We're going to have 2 rounds of discussion. The first will be around the vision of change we would like to see, and then the next will really be about those concrete steps. Okay, so thanks everyone. I'm going to hand over to Michael to kick us off.
Thank you, Charlotte. Greetings, friends. It's good to see you all. In this session, you're going to be listening mostly, and then consider ways that you can take action individually at the very end. Which action steps you can pick up and carry out of the room with you. So I'd like to invite everyone to focus on the summary of findings by each of the 4 group representatives. We're going to go in 2 rounds, as Charlotte mentioned. So the first question for the presenters from each of the groups to take a few minutes to respond to is summarize several key elements of the vision that your group outlined. Not all of the elements, but several of the key elements, with particular attention to those aspects of your vision that address some of the obstacles of moving education in emergencies, child protection, collaboration forward. So do you want to start?
Okay. So in our group discussion, I mean, really arriving at a vision was not easy. But anyhow, we considered existing frameworks that can help us get to where we want to be. So we looked at what's in the grand bargain with particular reference to the localization agenda and moving forward supporting local organizations to be involved in the integration work. We also looked at the SDGs as a framework that can help us bridge the gap between humanitarian and development setting, and also looking at how we can strengthen that or learn from our development sectors. Also the Inspire strategies and the education cannot wait, and the no loss generation. So we framed our vision within these existing frameworks that we can build on. So what's the vision? So the vision really that we're looking at is a child rights-centered joint programming based on a whole child concept, and also building on the ecological framework that we discussed yesterday. I think what was coming across through in our discussion is we still need to be very clear why we think collaboration works and why we think it's important and where it adds value for both sectors. So how do we get there? So, but just to highlight, linking to that, I think another discussion was on having a theory of change, but I will save that for a later discussion.
Super. So building on Helen's group, we didn't come up with a vision statement per se, but all the discussions really centered around putting the child in the center and seeing that whole child. Neither did we settle on one model of collaboration, but we saw that there were 4 key elements as we work more closely together that we need to forefront and strengthen. So one was creating a shared theory of change, and with that have shared objectives and indicators. The next one is to build a stronger evidence base for advocacy. The third one was developing some concrete program models for integrated or collaborative work between education in emergencies and child protection in emergencies. And then the fourth element was around stronger capacities and how do we get to stronger capacities. And we have lots of ideas to share in the next round.
Okay, so this was group 2. We obviously were trying, like the other groups, we're trying to bring together 4 subgroups. So whether this faithfully represents what the individual groups discussed, well, I'll do my best. So again, we sort of, when the 4 of us came together, we sort of again agreed on this idea of child well-being and child rights as being an organising framework, similar to what was presented on the first day. In terms of what collaboration looks like and the models, although there were problems, some people have had problems with the term models of collaboration being implemented or that should be promoted, we sort of agreed that that would look different in different situations. So in terms of a vision, we have a common organising framework centred on child wellbeing and child rights, and that in order to achieve that, there are different models of collaboration are being successfully implemented at the field level, that funding is available to do that, and that those different models might involve, depending on the context, integrated, joint, coordinated, mainstream programming. In order to understand what models or what approaches to coordination or collaboration are most appropriate in different situations, there's a need for joint needs assessment, joint planning and co-ownership. We also, linking to what one of the other presenters mentioned, there was also talk about the importance of linking to the localization agenda, and some of the groups in particular felt that that locally owned integrated programs should be a very key piece of this vision.
Okay, group 1, and we also did not quite look at the vision part very clearly, however, and without repeating all the great contributions, we of course emphasize that we would like to build on existing structures and move towards more common frameworks. So not necessarily inventing the wheel, but doing better with what we already have. Through more open spaces for cooperation and collaboration. And of course, also if you have a vision, it's of course the same for us as for those speaking before me, is child-centered approaches and promoting these based on the child rights agenda as well.
Thanks, everyone. Really, hopefully gives us a sense of the shared conversations and share idea around this vision. It seems like a really strong sense of that, a framework around well-being, this more holistic approach, which seems to have emerged in all of the conversations. And then other, I think, connecting themes around not perhaps having one model, but understanding that we'll need different approaches in different contexts, but a growing understanding around what that might mean in practice, I think, feels like the next question to that. Again, we've had common themes around building on existing frameworks and existing structures that are in place, the need to find those spaces for collaboration, and building again on the localization agenda. So it sounds like lots of key things emerging, but maybe there will be more differences when we're thinking about what that means in practice and what that looks like. Michael, I don't know.
And that's a perfect segue to thinking a little bit about what does this look like in action? What really would begin to move the education in emergencies, child protection, cooperation agenda in the direction of these elements of shared vision. So I'd like to then turn to each group to highlight some of the key action steps that your group recommended, perhaps highlighting those that are most important or those that you think are logically first in a sequence of ongoing steps to carry out.
Okay. So in terms of the sequence, perhaps it's important to start moving this discussion from a global level here to the regional level. So we thought about regional workshops to bring the discussion to the country level, where representatives of civil society and governments would be invited, because we have this divide between ministries where we don't have this overlap and cross-sector work. A logical next step would then be a joint theory of change, again at the country level, at the global level, also by the donor community. And in terms of implementation, starting with joint assessments, which would be the basis for joint program cycle management and for project cycle management. Related to the project cycle management, we have the research and evidence, because no size fits all, and we have to distinguish between what works in certain contexts and for whom. And this requires harmonized data and tools. So if there are no harmonized data and tools, there will be no basis for research and for evidence. It will be very difficult. The evidence then needs to be harnessed. We need evidence-based advocacy. And we listed some examples here, maybe one-pager checklist for the clusters on how to coordinate, some case studies, to have some champions at the global level, for example, ECW, to take at the local level, for example, safeguarding as a starting point in the schools for the joint work. And then we thought about the funding perspective. So here there was a strong call, not only for cross-sectoral funding, but also for pooled funding. And also to work strategically with the smaller donors. So how can smaller donors contribute to this? For example, by funding joint assessments and funding a process of co-creation and design of joint programs. And then the financing and of implementation could be taken over by a larger donor. And one last aspect which we considered crucial was to build a professional capacity and to build in the training, not only for those who are already engaged in our field of education and child protection, but also for the next generation who will be working in this field, to build it already in the training and into different capacity building measures.
Right. Well, we were quite verbose, and I would say following the matrix that we were given, we would have about 150 recommendations. And I've been given a matrix, a synthesized matrix of maybe 40 to read out, and they're not projected either. So I don't think I'm going to go that route. I think a lot of what we have in our matrix actually echoes very well what's already been developed, and I feel what will also be expounded by the following teams, which is very reassuring. I'm going to step back for a moment and actually ask, what do we need to do as two entities, as Inee and the Alliance, to push this forward, so on the micro and macro level? And there are things, there was a task team that was put together to create this forum. Well, obviously we want more to come out of this, and that task team needs to continue. So I hope that is a recommendation and an action that comes out. There needs to be endorsement if we are going to have joint assessment tools or training modules and so on. There needs to be a co-branding and an endorsement. So we need to figure that out as two entities, how we're going to collaborate on that. I understand that in both entities' strategic plans, collaboration between these two sectors isn't there as a goal. So maybe we need to be revisiting our strategic plans and making sure that we articulate that in a clear manner. Obviously, there is work to do together on advocacy around funding and raising the profile of collaborative work and the lessons that we have learned. But also a very large task, as we saw this morning, that remains, is for us to have common definitions of these levels or models of collaboration, and then use that to have a common framework between our sectors and between our groups. And a really interesting proposal was put forward that we each have a very strong set of standards, and a starting point might be to match those two sets of standards to see where they link clearly, and where they don't link is at an understandable divergence because of various specializations that we have, or is that a gap where we need to be bringing ourselves closer together. To summarize the rest. I think there was some interesting discussion around the role of the donors and the momentum that the donors have. Some donors, as we know, already have in their guidelines to work more collaboratively across a variety of sectors, ours included. So there was a suggestion that there be some kind of light touch lessons learned review of that amongst the donors, and then harmonization where possible of the guidance that they give their applicants. And then see if more donors can be brought into this approach using these lessons learned in these harmonized set of guidance. And I'm told there's some opportunity to do that in the coming days even. And then we tried to steer away from the macro and come up, as I say, in these 40/140 recommendations with some quite concrete measures, which are echoed in the 4 elements that I laid out. So there's quite a lot of, there's a good thread running throughout. One of them that I found particularly interesting was around our competencies and the competency framework that each of us use, the 2 sectors use, and that we use not only the organizations that are here, but our partners and other institutes. And that there is a great opportunity to align those and to see what is indeed core, core humanitarian, core to those who work with children and on child's well-being and development and so on. So to use that as a starting point for a lot more of how we develop together. I'll leave it at that.
Wow, that's very impressive. We were told to identify 4 points. Yes, exactly. So. So I think where we think we need to start, and I think everything that's been said so far really echoes what also came up in our groups. The first step, I think, would be engaging in advocacy as the Alliance and INEE on why integration is necessary. And that might involve advocacy to our members as well as outside to donors and to agencies and so forth. So I think step 1 would be really developing some sort of talking points and sort of a 1-pager, 2-pager summarizing why it's important for integration to take place. And then we could even incorporate that into the work of the advocacy working group. And then once and have the heads of the Alliance and INE sort of use these talking points in the very many meetings that they go to on the international stage. So this will be a way of presenting it to donors and to agencies and sort of getting some buzz about it at the global level and also at the regional and local level, depending on the meetings that they go to. And of course also for members to use this same advocacy package in the work that they do. So that would be the first step. We need to make the case and then go out and get support for it. As part of that process, we probably need to do that first before we start combining tools and creating common tools. So we first need to get some buy-in to this idea, and I think that's not going to be such a quick process. Once we get that, we also need to start creating common tools, which both groups I think have already mentioned. And one of our subgroups suggested creating a new set of standards that are focused on children's well-being. And just to throw a little bit of radical ideas here in this room, right at the end of the day, getting rid of the child protection minimum standards and the INE minimum standards, perhaps. Shock and horror. I won't identify whose idea that was. So that's another sort of an area we need to work on is the materials. Another thing that came up a lot was the need to find a common lexicon so that we're not using jargon. And as I said this to the group, I was like, and we should probably start by not using the word lexicon. Maybe we could just say language. So we need to, and we were saying also even just in the slides that we've been presenting ourselves, we often use acronyms for things, and often even myself, not even, it's quite obvious that it would be myself, but I don't know what those acronyms stand for often. So just to always be cognizant of that not everyone is versed in the same language that others are. Once we've got to that stage, we can start thinking about donors, and what was really emphasized by all 4 of our subgroups was a need for flexible funding. So flexible and long-term, so we can't have 6 months funding. It needs to be multi-year funding that's not sector-based and that can respond to needs that come up through the assessment. So there might be more child protection, there might be more education, there might be other areas that need to be supported, and there needs to be the flexibility to do that. And again, that this funding should be focused on children's well-being and rights, and that should be sort of the lens that the funding is looked at rather than through a sector. And then, of course, if we do get that funding, or if we do want to work in an integrated manner, the agencies themselves need to figure out how they're going to do that themselves. And this may involve developing multidisciplinary teams and providing cross-disciplinary training to ensure that staff members have the basic skills and understanding of both disciplines, recognizing at the same time that we're not asking each staff person to do the full array of tasks or have the full array of responsibilities for both sectors. There will still be specialized sectors and specialized staff, but that there needs to be sort of a basic understanding of the work of both sectors and sort of a basic level of competency. So there we go.
So group 1 looked at the very, very concrete measures from 3 angles, from the angle of practitioners, policy, and donors. Charlotte, okay. We are sharing the 3.
Hi. Yeah, sure. So this has sort of been mentioned, but it came up in our group, and we tried to draw a diagram, which you maybe can't see. But it is about the minimum standards point, and this idea that if we're really serious about kind of this more holistic approach to child well-being, using the SDGs rather to deliver on that and ensuring sort of protective, safe quality programming. And it gets to a point others have mentioned, but how these 2 brilliant organizations, networks work together. So again, this idea of a task team, but specifically around this issue of the minimum standards and kind of the updating and review process to ensure they are more closely aligned. But then we were kind of thinking about the what next, and thinking about how, if we find those critical touch points and do align those minimum standards, how does that then inform our work? And so finding those common areas, and as they relate to, say, measurement and indicators, or to capacity, which has come up a lot, or to knowledge management, or to evidence generation. And so kind of the work of this task team to do that would then hopefully help us deliver more effectively on child well-being. And so all of this would link back to the discrete things that we're doing, but that are so inherently connected in so many ways in the middle. And then that would lead into more evidence-based advocacy, for example, using the SDG framework and the language of holistic child well-being. So not quite as radical as getting rid of the standards, but some really concrete ways forward that this could, hopefully, this stream of work would then inform all of the practice that we are then doing. So yeah, just very much drawing on what others have already said.
Yeah, you can see it really closely. Yeah.
I should just say that all came from the genius of Bente's brain, no credit from me. So thank you to Bente.
So from the policy aspect, there were 2 issues discussed. On the one hand, and some of them might seem sort of low-hanging fruits and easy to do, but we are still not really doing it. So about the processes, what we could improve. So of course, promote integrated policy development. through consultative approaches. And for example, like if you develop education policy, why don't you bring in the child protection considerations? And the other aspect was suggestions for, research-driven policy development was specifically mentioned as something that can be a powerful tool to bring the two sectors together. The second issue was suggestion for concrete policy areas where the two sectors could work together. Civil registration, out-of-school children, and ending violence of schools were specifically mentioned. And these not only bring together child protection and education emergencies, but of course they are very relevant from a nexus, so humanitarian development nexus perspective as well. A further area for concrete policy area is, as it was mentioned already, measuring child development outcomes, working on that much better. And finally, something really interesting, a discussion around the importance of depoliticizing children. I guess that links very much into advocacy. So child protection and education emergencies to come together to push back the sort of securitization that we see in many humanitarian contexts where children education become targets. Now, on some specific measures for donors, we had a good discussion around creating more opportunities for dialogue and linking that to existing structures. So as I said before, not to reinvent the wheel, and we have Inee and we have Alliance, and also the clusters, or the cluster and the AOR. These dialogues should be donor to donor, so there could be some cross-fertilization, but also, very importantly, donor and practitioner. Again, running theme is materials. Short and snappy around the importance of child-centered approaches would need to be developed to make the case for donors, but also to support donors in incorporating these into their work. We did not really talk about getting rid of the standards. We kind of got stuck that at the point that this should actually be institutionalized by donors. If there's going to be more integrated standards, those as well. And of course, training and capacity development is very important so that they can actually implement it and not just have a nice policy paper. And of course, the measurement learning outcomes needs to be supported by, underpinned by funding. So we are discussing the importance of investment in M&E and learning. Thanks.
Am I allowed 30 seconds to add something? Can I add something? Yes, yes, I'm allowed to add something, and I'll be very brief. But it's just to reinforce something that was just mentioned. There was a real appetite in our group to go out and do something together now, to do something practical and clear. And one of the recommendations was, we brainstormed a number of topics, some of which have been mentioned. We brainstormed about 10 topics: attacks on schools, early marriage, child labor, mine risk education, etc. So to put that to Alliance and Inee members and say, okay, if we have a theme or two themes that we're going to work on collaboratively and concretely over the next 2 or 5 years, whatever the time frame is, then what should they be? And then in 3 months we'll know, and we'll have a short plan, and we can start working. Because I think, you know, we want to build on the momentum of the room, and there is an appetite to do, and not only to, you know, make structures and documents and things like this. So I would just add to that.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Really, powerful reflections. I think a lot of commonalities that we're seeing. I think a lot for Inee and the Alliance to take forward. Sorry, I hope we've not put too much on your plate, but it's very exciting. So I think a lot sits with them in terms of wanting to continue the work of the task force or the task team and the collaboration around that. whether that's in terms of the strategy or the advocacy or the common language, or choosing these specific themes to take forward. And then also lots of common themes around how that could then, and of course the standards, but then and how that could inform other work around research and evidence, for example, or around capacity building and competencies. So I think we're seeing a lot of connected themes that then potentially starts with this really initial strong effort from the Alliance and from Inee, which of course involves all of us. So given that, and as we have a little bit of time, we'd like to ask you on your tables to just reflect together on what that might mean, what the challenges to some of the things you've heard today are, but what you feel are those things that we can take forward. So if we just have 5 minutes, just reflecting on what you've heard about the other groups on your tables. We won't be sharing back, this is just for your internal discussion.
Want to.
hear from us. I guess, sorry, the guys online want to fill in, please, so we put in mind. We already have one. It's not clear.
Stopping us from doing it. I mean, like, okay, they say you have to have a cluster or whatever. That doesn't even say nominally we have a cluster group, but actually we're going to plan together. We're going to set up our activities together. We're going to design our programs together. We could do it. We don't. Or refugee settings. We don't have that. Everything's under the protection working group, and actually, not everywhere. Some places we've just followed the same old cluster thing, but in some places we have much more integrated groups. I don't think it always works, but sometimes it works. But yeah, if you want to try it in a refugee setting, we don't have that problem. We can set it up however we want.
Okay, thanks everyone. I know it's incredibly hot in here, so apologies. Sorry to cut you off if you're in mid-conversation, but we are nearing the end of the day. Not quite. Trying to do my best teacher stare at you all, and it's really not working. So we just have a really quick question. Based on the reflections you've heard and the conversations today, we'd just like to do a quick hands up if you are willing to take action and be a part of this agenda to move this collaboration forward. So hands up if you are willing to be one of those change agents. Hoping most of you. Otherwise I'm going to cry.
This is how social norm transformation occurs. Who are the leaders in these reference groups, and are they raising their hands, and are we following them? Okay, so we know that the recommendations made today have not been finally crafted. They're not developed into a document. We're not reviewing them systematically. Nonetheless, I think there's a shared understanding that everyone who is motivated to come to this meeting is interested in exploring this topic further and figuring out ways together to advance it in some way, in some form. And we've got a great set of recommendations from the team leads of the working groups throughout the day about possible pathways forward. Those are going to be synthesized, recorded, and then shared back. So if I could ask everyone's indulgence, on each table are green cards. If everyone would take a green card, this is the final processy step of the meeting, I promise. Eileen's sharing hers around. If everybody would just grab either a blank piece of paper or a green card. And I'm going to ask everyone in the room to take 30 seconds to a minute, think quietly about yourself. So you're now returning to your role in your organization, the work you do every day. In that role, in your organization, what is one thing you're willing to do to start this agenda moving forward? What would you do first to advance this agenda? How would you blend it into your work plan over the next month? So give it a think, and then identify that one thing. And that's actually a note to self. All right. Please raise your hand if you need another minute or so to finish your thought. Has everybody more or less got a bullet point for their work plan written down? So if you wouldn't mind, just fold up that piece of paper, slip it into one of your pockets or your purse or your briefcase or your backpack, bring it home with you and add it to your work plan. So let me ask Charlotte, what was one thing you heard in the report back that inspired you?
So I think something that's been inspiring for me across the 2 days has been that's just that sense of commitment to more of a shared agenda and a shared approach around this more holistic approach to child development. And that I know that's kind of been work that's been going on for a long time, but to get so many different experts and practitioners with that shared objective, I think is really powerful. And if we can then follow up on the how, and I'm really excited to see what that looks like, I think that could be a really significant step forward. So I think just seeing a sense of shared agenda and shared mission across so many diverse actors has been really exciting. But yeah, really needing to think about the next steps. But yeah, how about you?
Well, I am inspired. And I also know that this is going to be very hard work to move this agenda forward. But my 1-minute history lesson suggests to me that it's entirely possible to roll this rock up the hill. I remember a time when there was no such thing as Inee, and there was no child protection working group working alongside of the protection cluster. The carve-out on child protection was not structured, was not validated. And back in the day, some of the agitators, some of the change agents got together in the late 90s and said these kinds of things should be higher up on the agenda. In 2000, that group of education actors who were very concerned about all the children not in school, in conflict-affected and emergency situations, got together as a side meeting at the World Conference on Education for All in Dakar and said those children should not be left out of the equation. This is turning into a meeting of ministries of education, and they only care about the kids that are already on their lists and in their schools. So that gave birth to Inee. It has been functioning ever since as a means of fostering collaboration in a fiercely competitive field. The same with the Child Protection Working Group. It was a fierce effort on the part of activists in the humanitarian space to say children is a special interest group. It's a specially vulnerable population. We can't leave it out. It's not mothers and children over here. The feminists don't dig that way of looking at things, and children are not appendages of adults. They're people with rights. So that group forged an alliance to build a child protection working group, built its own set of minimum standards, got them approved. And since the Humanitarian Summit and since the deliberations and the reflections on new ways of working in humanitarian response, prevention, preparedness, the Alliance was born as a new iteration, as a 2.0. That was the work of activists and change agents like yourselves. And those are field changes in structure, dynamics, and they are fostering greater collaboration to have greater influence than we can have individually. Education cannot wait. 20 years ago, it was clear to us there was a giant gap in the funding. There's development-oriented gap funding for sector-wide planning and education. There was social protection money slowly coming to the fore, but there was a big gap in the relief to development continuum, this middle strand of financing. It was always last, it was always less, it was an unfunded mandate in every common appeal. We said we have to change that condition. And slowly over time, an advocacy process was brought together at country level, youth advocates from all over the world, advocating, being trained, showing up at global meetings, forcing their way into the SDG process, identifying where it would fit in the 17 goals and indicators, and saying this has to be financed. Eventually, Gordon Brown said, as the envoy for education, I will be the megaphone for this. Where are the young advocates? We're going to have them show up everywhere we need to show up. We're going to fill this bucket. We're going to give it a structure. It's going to become another World Bank pooled fund, and we're going to now have Education Cannot Wait. These changes in our field conditions and structures occurred because of advocates like you, change agents like you. If we want to forge a greater alliance between the realms of child protection, action, and thinking, and the world of education and emergencies, action and thinking, we put our minds to it and we stick with it. In 5 or 10 years, this will become a mainstreamed activity, a way of doing business. But it's up to us to translate the first steps we've identified today, individually and collectively, into a long-term marathon. We've got to stay the course. And when I look out at this room, I see 3 generations of leaders. I see people like me. I'm headed to my rocking chair by the beach sometime fairly soon. I want to mentor Charlotte. I want to collaborate with each of you. Those of you leading agencies, leading program efforts, you're the next rank of leaders. We have to follow you on this agenda. And then your junior staff, the staff that are running projects in the field, the staff that are building competency, are in graduate school, are becoming the PhDs of tomorrow, you're the next wave. And this is a relay race. We've got to keep going on this. That's what I'm excited about and inspired by in a room like this. So let's go do it together. Connie and Dean, it's your turn. What we'd like to hear from you is a little bit about how our 2 platforms can help us make this happen, and what you see as the next steps in sharing back with everybody the agenda we've set and of helping us take action. Thank you all very much.
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit speechless. I think what you just said was very much inspiring, and I would like to thank you. And I think that little inch of emotion that we have all felt right now is a very good metaphor of what happened the past 2 days. And I'm not going to speak very long, and I will give soon the floor to Dean and Hani to walk you through some of interesting closing remark. But I would like to say that I was quite impressed as well by what happened outside of this meeting room, in the corridors, at the coffee breaks. People really keep talking together, meeting together. Some even said to me, oh, we are friends now. And I think what I'm trying to say is that I have the feeling, even if the path is going to be long and not easy, and we have a lot of work to do to accomplish some of the recommendations that have been just brought, I think what is important is that what we have clearly managed the past 2 days is to put down some barriers. We know each other. We start to know each other. We know that we have the child at the center of our work, whether it's child protection or education. we have found common bridges, common interest, and I think we need as well to take the time to reflect on that and keep building those new friendships that have been made over the past 2 days. And I'm going to give now the floor to Dean and Hani to recap. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Michael, for those closing words, and I think, well, yeah, it was emotional, yeah, because as probably many of you maybe you don't know, I mean, Michael is been somebody who has led the way. Let's see if that works. Okay. You know, Inee has gone through many lives over its almost 20 years, but it's been champions like Michael
One, two. One, two, one, two.
Is that better? Okay. Yeah. But those champions, you know, we talk often in Inee about advocacy and, you know, activism and all of that, but sometimes there's quiet advocacy. And I think it's the same when it comes to champions. There's some quiet champions who behind the scenes have actually helped us survive. And Inee is incredibly grateful. And that's why Inee is still here today, because we have a donor who has understood the importance of a network and what that can actually be. And without that flexibility, Inee wouldn't be here. And I'd say probably the Alliance has a similar background. And so, Michael, thank you for that. And thank you for recognizing that we do also have to bring up the next leaders, you know? Who is the next generation that's going to take on our work? That should actually be a part of our core mandate, in a sense. And, you know, I think some of you might have seen, I've introduced several of you to Lois from University of Kenya, there she is, who has started a master's degree program on education emergencies, and nobody knows about it. Everybody should know about it. And that's part of bringing up this next generation. And, you know, I appreciate that you raised those points, Michael. And I think that's also part of something that the Alliance and Inee can continue to work on. Because, you know, when people ask me, what is Inee, I'm always saying, well, you know, when I was a teacher, I had a professional network that I worked with, and now that I do education emergencies, Inee is that for me. And I think the Alliance represents that for all of your child protection actors and practitioners. And so for our networks to continue to grow, to be there 20 years from now, that means all of you have to help make that happen. And I think you will. I think that's what we've seen over these last couple of days. You know, I've written down my little things here, and it's basically, you know, I'm going to call Audrey and Hani more regularly. We're going to meet. We're going to follow this up. This is not the end. We don't have a beautiful PowerPoint to show you now, but we will at some point. And yeah, this is the beginning, you know. I joked before that, oh, it looked like we were coming into a wedding reception in this place. Maybe in some ways it is, so.
Thanks, that was a very nice metaphor for this. And I think we're all also kind of continuing on that metaphor, getting used to each other. So it was maybe one of those arranged marriages where you, only when the marriage happens, you start getting used to each other. So, and I actually want to use that and say, I noticed a shift from yesterday morning when everyone was talking, it was very clearly from a very sectoral kind of corner. Up to today, which I still think that people are still feeling a bit uncomfortable with the idea of and some people are talking about, oh, are the two sectors going to disappear and there's going to be one sector coming up? So there's still that fear, but I felt like several times I heard from education colleagues talking about, we absolutely buy into this common vision. It's just how to get there, which is a different kind of language that we were hearing the first day. So I think we already have come, and probably the same you guys feeling from the child protection actors. So I feel like we have already come a long way, and it's, as Dean said, it's just the beginning of the process. So one thing that I'm very excited about is I feel like this common vision for a healthy child well-being and healthy development seems to have resonated with everyone. I haven't heard anyone challenge it. So I think potentially a pledge from a lot of you guys, you already have made some pledges, might be to continue keeping that in the corner of your mind as you do your work, as you do your advocacy, as you develop your tools. Inee, when you do your next iteration of minimum standards, make sure that it's that centrality of well-being is there. We will do the same thing. We actually, in fact, are moving towards developing a more concrete definition for well-being and resilience, and we'll learn from what you guys have done. So keeping that kind of common vision in mind, I think already is going to move us to a much better place in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, even without doing anything else. But we do want to do more. We do want to, as Alliance and Inee, as Dean said, we're going to definitely call each other and have more lunches. But we will try to pull together a group of you guys, because at the end of the day, we're just platforms for all of you guys to come together and collaborate. A group of you guys to create a joint working group that then turns whatever has come out of this into a work plan that can be implemented, fundraised against, and the work plan will be what basically moves this agenda forward. What is going to be exactly in the work plan? You will define it, and what comes out of this defines it, and how much we can implement it. Again, you will define how much we can implement and move it forward. But I want to make sure that we all walk out of here kind of agreeing that we're going to move it forward, and concrete steps are potentially the work plan, and we will talk about it more, the form and shape of it. We'll communicate with everyone. And I wanted to quickly show this that I very quickly put together based on actually something that came up in a group that I was in, and also another group. Yeah. I was talking to people and said, oh, we drew something exactly like this, which is partly to say, first of all, the child well-being piece, which I just spoke about, but also to say that I don't think there's any suggestion that the two sectors are going to disappear, at least at this point. Why is this thing not working? Sorry. Sorry. So the idea is, and I think this, I got this from discussion with Michael yesterday, this idea of, rather than saying we're all working towards the same thing, saying that we are all contributing to child well-being. We're all different components of completing this puzzle of child well-being and healthy development. So there will be parts that child protection will probably continue, even in an ideal world, doing as a specialized child protection intervention. There will be parts that will happen in the middle. Maybe the middle part will grow, but I don't think there will ever be a point where there's no specialized child protection intervention or no specialized education intervention. And I think that kind of might be a model that we want to, again, I very quickly put it together based on what I saw in two different groups. But just to say that it's not about disappearing something and then creating something new. I think it's about building on what exists and creating that common vision. I stop there, and I thank every one of you guys for participating. We also want to thank a few other people that some of whom we mentioned in the beginning, some of whom we haven't. So I'll pass back over to Audrey, who has the whole list. There's a lot of people to thank the people who contributed.
Okay. Thank you. So we would like to take the time to thank the donors group who follow us on that idea and supported us in different ways. And we will start with the Elevate Children Funders and the International Education Funders Group. This as well has been possible thanks to VITOL Foundation, the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, USAID, UNICEF, Save the Children, and World Vision. We said that at the beginning as well, but I think it's quite important to highlight that we would like to thank as well UNHCR and UNICEF regional office and country offices for their endless support pre-meeting, but as well during meeting. We would like all the moderators and facilitators of the past 2 days to stand up, and I think they deserve almost a great standing ovation for the incredible work they have done for that meeting to go that smoothly. So please stand up and let's give a round of applause. Right, they were a little bit less shy in their smaller groups. We would like as well to really extend our thank you and gratitude to the members of Inee and Alliance Secretariat for their dedicated hard work the past month, the past few days, the past few hours. So again, let's give them a good And now I would like the following people to stand up. I would like Edna, Faith, Julie, Bernice, Archeng, and Jennifer and her team in the back to stand up, please. Be brave, great. They have been, so we have been live streamed over the past few days, thanks to Jennifer and her team. And I mean, I would like really to extend my thank you to the girls, the volunteers who stood up and said, yeah, let's do it. And who have been there since Saturday with us. And just, how can I say that? It was such a break for us to be able to say, can you please look after that? And we knew that was done. So if you find that everything was going well, they did the backstage job. We would like us, oh, yeah, please. I'm not gonna stop you. Huh?
The leaders of the future.
Please say it. I think it was.
No, I was just going to say that they will be the leaders of the future. They're going to be sitting in your seats very soon, commenting and contributing to these conversations.
So I hope we were inspiring enough. We would like to thank you, Chris, from UNICEF, who has been helping us on logistic and IT and so on, but I'm not sure he's in the room. He might be actually outside to help us with logistic as we speak. Our gratitude goes to the hotel staff and team. And again, the amount of work they have done prior to this meeting has been just incredible, but as well throughout the past 2 days. Finally, but not least, we have sent to you just an email with a survey. We would like to get your feedback from the event, and this will be very helpful for us to get better the next time to start with, but as well to keep reflecting on what just happened the past 2 days. So please, that would be great if you take 10 minutes of your time before leaving the room to fill the survey. And for the one who didn't come with your computer, please, please, please do it before leaving us. And Jean has an announcement to make as well, sorry.
So number 4 on my list, on my little piece of paper, is to go to the pool on Wednesday night for drinks with my colleagues at the Alliance. So I think I forgot to tell everybody about that, but we do have planned Wednesday night where Inee members and Alliance members, it's up to you. It's a cash bar, so you have to pay your own way, but we have reserved space at the pool here so that folks can meet up. But I'm trying to remember what time. Do we remember? Was it 7? 6:30. Okay. Does that work? 6:30? Sonia? 7. Okay. 7. Yeah, because we're at Kenyatta University, so we have to walk. No, we don't have to walk. Yeah, 9 o'clock. So yeah, so just to keep this conversation going. So Wednesday night, since Inee's working groups are meeting, Alliance is meeting, so we're going to all come on over here, and then you're free to go off to dinner and so forth.
So, as I would say in French, this is not an adieu, this is just an au revoir. So, we are very much looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at that pool, and I hope that that day, tomorrow, apart from each other, will help us as well to reflect on these 2 days, and we will be very much happy to see each other again and keep building those new friendships that started over the past 2 days. On this note, I think we can just thank you all. Give yourself as well a big round of applause because you have been fantastic. And you're free to go. We wish you the survey first, sorry. And we wish you a lovely evening.
Pamoja.
Where do we look? To the camera? Hi everyone, we are live on Facebook and from the meeting room where the meeting just ended. I'm going to give you...
Yeah, we should go outside.
in the joy and happiness. Live from the meeting room, we are with Ibrahim.
We're live.
Are you live right now?
Goodness me. Excuse me. Hello. Hello. This one is off now.
Oh.
Yeah, you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, we are live from the meeting room where we just ended our beautiful 2-day roundtable, a collaboration between education and child protection in humanitarian context. I'm going to give the mic to Hani Mansourian and Dean Brooks, who will give you a short summary of the discussion. And it's Hi everyone, we are live from the meeting room where the Roundtable Inee Alliance just ended. We have been talking the past 2 days about a framework for collaboration between child protection and education in humanitarian context. I'm going to give now the floor to Dean Brooks and Hani Mansourian to give you a short summary of the main outcomes from the meeting.
Thanks for those of you who could join us, and we just look forward to following up. And this is just the beginning of a number of good things. As you can hear behind me, people are really excited. A lot of new friendships have been made, a lot of rich discussions, and really just looking forward to the next steps. And we look forward to keeping you posted as we move things forward. Hani?
Yes, so there has been a pledge in the room to follow up from all of the individuals who are here. They each made an individual pledge. And as Inee and Alliance, we will follow up on the recommendations that have come out. We'll hopefully create a space where the two sectors can continue working with each other, not just in this room, but beyond. And then we'll see when we have to get back together in a room like this in 5 years or 10 years to see how far we have gone. Yeah. Thank you very much for tuning in and following the conversations. Peter, last word?
No, you're fine.
All right. Au revoir. Goodbye, everyone.